Remember that cricket is a funny game. 100 years before we protected our head, players looked after their groins. So don't be as stupid as old cricketers. Protect your computer now. NordVPN is the protection I use when facing cyber shortballs or when rights issues try to dismiss me. Geo-block so you can watch all the cricket you want. Grab your NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/Kimber.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 50 of the Footmarks podcast. I'm your host, Behram and Qazi, who you can find at DefMango on Twitter. And with me, as always, is Jarrod Kimber, who you can find literally everywhere. 50 episodes, Jarrod. 2 more, and we've been doing this for a year.
Wow. Well, I mean,
yeah, it is.
Just what an incredible effort for us, the way that we've managed to do this. I think we're halfway to our goal.
Absolutely. And the title for today's episode is Sai-Way or the Highway. And it took me a long time to come up with that when the whole team was working on it. And I
think you spend longer on the titles than I do remembering what we're going to be doing. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you'll be sending me back, what about this time? I don't know, man. I can't even remember. I'm just going to go on and you're going to ask me questions.
I've got a reputation for the punny titles now and people like them. So I work really hard on them. But anyway, let's get into the meat of this podcast because Sai Sudharsan is an absolute anomaly. The 22-year-old left-handed batter who is a star batter at the Gujarat Titans and scored like 90-odd in last year's IPL final. He has a penchant to not get out cheaply almost ever. In 41 T20s, at the time when this episode was recorded, Sai Sudharsan has gotten out for single digits for a grand total of 3 times, which is ridiculous. And Jarrod,
none of those are in the IPL.
Yeah.
Those are all in the SMAT.
I suppose just to kick things off, I want to ask you, how did you even stumble upon this freakish little fact?
It's something I noticed. So I did some commentary late last year on the IPL with TalkSport. And I just noticed that he kept getting in, over and over again. And then when I started doing Cricket 8, Rob Barron was talking about how he always bets Sudharsan's overs and then bets his unders. So he bets him to be over 25 runs and then under 40 or 45 or 50 or whatever that may be. And how Sudharsan had made him lots of money because of the consistency that this guy had done. And so then me and Varun started talking about it. And I can't remember how the piece actually came about. I think I just said to him, he seems really consistent. How do we work out how consistent he is? And then I think Varun did all the high-tech stuff, and then I just went and looked at all of his T20 innings. I was like, oh my God, he's only been out 3 times in single figures. And you've got to understand, that is, if that sounds a little bit shocking to you, it should be really shocking to you, because most players go out consistently in single figures in T20 cricket specifically.
Yeah.
And then you get to the other part, which is, he doesn't kick on. So go back to Rob Barron's bets. Remember what Rob Barron's bets were? It was bet him on his overs. The minute he gets to his overs, bet him on his unders, right? So you can double bubble with him every time, which means that he gets set and he gets in and then he doesn't go past 45 all that often, right? And so you have this double end to him that doesn't make sense. If you tell me he's a really, really good starter consistently, I'll be like, well, if he's getting in all the time, he's probably going deeper to the innings. And then you start to go, well, how is that possible that you can be that good at starting and not go on? And so, suddenly, myself and Varun were down this rabbit hole of how do we work out what a consistent player is and, standard deviation and mean and all these sorts of things. Are there other consistent players? And, then we started to put it together. And the minute we put him up on scatter graphs, we were just looking and go, oh, okay, yeah, he is not like anyone else. And even when he's near other players, they're not similar kinds of players to him. He should be with the anchors, and he's up there with like the number 5 and 6s who always come in and get themselves set and then start to slog.
Yeah, it is really, fascinating the way his numbers stack up. And if you guys haven't read the piece yet, go to goodareas.co and read that piece because you'll see exactly where that Sai Sudharsan dot is. But anyway, some more crazy facts are that at the start of his career, he just had 1 single-digit score, and that also was a 9, which is otherworldly. The fact that he's so consistent and doesn't really kick on, so his strike rates aren't all that great. And if you look at his list A record as well, right? He has batted 27 times in list A cricket. And he also has 3 single-digit scores over there. So versus the white ball, in 41 plus 27, which is 68 innings.
I love what you did there.
This man has 6 single-digit scores, which screams efficiency with respect to crossing 10. And of what little white ball cricket he's played, that is a trend that I don't think we've ever seen before, like ever.
No, I remember looking at KL Rahul once, and he had an incredible run of like, God, I got to remember, but it was an old video. But he had an incredible run of like 20 consistent games where he didn't dip below 10. And I never found another player with a run anywhere near that at the time. And you're talking about someone doing it from the start of his career. Like, if you tell me you're doing it with someone in their peak, that's fine. Okay, they got on a good run and they're a good player. But this is a guy who's just started, right? And it's a remarkable way to begin your career across 2 different formats, right? I know they're both white ball, but 2 different formats. He'd have slightly different roles. His ability to go out in the middle and not be nervous from a young age, I don't think I've ever seen anyone do anything like this before. And I still can't tell how good he is. Like, what does that mean? He's going to go on to be an absolute great of this sport? Or does it just mean he's got this brilliant way of starting an innings that no one else has ever worked out before?
Yeah. And what's even more incredible, and I suppose what makes him an even more bizarre phenomena, is that Sai doesn't start off slow. He actually has brisk starts in T20 cricket, right? He tends to slow down later, like so many other Indian anchors who just knock it around, once they've gotten set. But the fact that this guy actually starts off quick and still doesn't get dismissed in single digits all too frequently, it just doesn't make sense. None of it pieces together.
No, it's really, again, another bizarre added fact, because I would have, you kind of regress on this stuff, right? You start with, I think I've got this theory on this dude. Me and Varun start looking at it. We look at it individually and together. And then I go, okay, well, he will start slowly. And that's, he gets to 10 off 10 every time. And then you look at it and go, actually, he's starting quite quick. And he's hitting these boundaries early on. And then he's slowing down. And again, he doesn't fit any template of what normal cricket brain would tell you. And I know, I don't know if he's ever talked about his method or anything, because when you watch him, I wouldn't say there's anything within his game that makes me. Do you remember Luke Ronchi?
Yes, of course I do.
Yeah. So Luke Ronchi was the quickest starter in the world for like 7 years in T20 cricket. And the first time I asked a question, I got the answer. And it wasn't even to Luke, it was to someone who knew Luke. I think it was someone from Islamabad United. And I said, what's the deal with Luke Ronchi? And they said he gets nervous. So what he does is he just tries to hit the first 2 or 3 balls for 4. And once he's got one of them away, he feels really good. And by that stage, he's got this incredible strike rate. And he's a brilliant striker of the ball. And he keeps going because he feels confident. I'm like, that makes sense. Nothing about Sai Sudharsan makes sense.
Yeah, you had a sentence in your piece which said that if you've seen Sai Sudharsan bat once, you've seen every single Sai Sudharsan innings, which is very, very apt. But let's get to the numbers, right? Because you guys did a lot of statistical analysis. And if you look at mean scores in the IPL since 2022, right? Which is basically his first season in the IPL. And for those of you who don't know, average is basically your runs per dismissal. But mean over here is runs per innings. Yep. So he is basically, after Jarrod wrote the piece, and I've updated the numbers now, thanks to Varun once again, who, by the way, was really excited for this one. He was like, this is the first footmarks that I'm directly associated with. I'm happy for Varun over there. So basically, if you look at his mean, Sai Sudharshan's, it is a touch over 40. So he gets at least 40 runs per innings, which is wild. And it's in the top 5 batters in this period since IPL 2022. And you know who these other batters are? Like your Devon Conways, Heinrich Klaassen, Shubman Gill, Joss Butler. And then you have Sai Sudharshan at 5. He's ahead of the likes of Kohli, KL Rahul, Sky, David Warner. And that to me is flat out ridiculous because you look at those first 4 names and those are mega stars. And then you look at the names after Sai Sudharshan and they are mega stars. And you've got Sai Sudharshan with the 5th highest mean score across nearly 3 IPLs now.
And I think you now realize why I noticed it, because every time I watched him play for Gujarat, he made runs. And you know what it's like? I think last year, I don't think I watched every game. 2022, I'm trying to think back, but I probably would never have watched every game, right? This year's probably the closest I've come in a while. And sometimes I go back and actually watch old games because I'm a sick person. But at the time, I don't watch all the games, if that makes sense. And every time I ever watched him, I saw him make runs. And then you think to yourself, maybe it's just me, right? There was this Liam Dawson. Remember Liam? You know Liam Dawson?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah. You're naming all these PSL stars, Jarrod. Of course I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I moved to the UK in 2008. Liam Dawson made 100 for Hampshire, I reckon, the first time I turned on the TV. A week later, he made 100 for the England under-19s on TV. A week later, he made 100 again. Then I went to watch Hampshire in our first-class game, and I think he made 70 or something. And they may not have been all hundreds, but he just made runs after runs. And I was like, Liam Dawson might be the greatest player of all time, right? And I probably saw peak Liam Dawson, right? He probably since then has never got back to that level. And so with Sudharsan, I was like, maybe it's that. Maybe it's absolutely nothing. And then you see the names that he's on that list with, and you're like, oh, no. I am not lucky to have seen Sudharsan make runs every time. I just have eyes and have the TV on when they're playing. That's all you need to do to see Sai Sudharsan make runs.
Yeah, and I mean, finds himself in esteemed company over there as well, which will shock many people. But when you look at Sai's mean and standard deviation coupled together, he sits in this box of his own on that scatter graph that you were talking about, right? He's not with batters who bat long, because he doesn't bat long. He's usually out by the 12th to 13th over. And then he doesn't even sit in the company of hitters because, well, he's not one. He doesn't score ultra quickly. And he has his own territory over here where he's scoring consistent runs at a decent clip, unfazed by the world around him, right?
Yep.
And that has got to be one of the most unique batting styles in all of T20 cricket, really, because in an era where people are scoring mad runs, you've got this, I wouldn't say pedestrian because he does hit a few, but, the strike rates are never all the way up. And he's batting in the middle overs. And he's
got a negative true strike rate, I'm pretty sure, through pretty much, except for the start, as we said before.
Yeah, look, and he consistently crosses 10, and, most of the times he doesn't get to 50.
You see guys like Glenn Maxwell and Shivam Dubey. I'm trying to think of some other guys around that have done similar roles for teams where they come in around that 7th, 8th, 9th over, right? And their job is to whack spinners.
Yeah.
But there aren't many of them, right? And then you have players like Suresh Raina or Ambati Raidu or, those kinds of players who come in to play spin. And then their job is to be aggressive against spin, but stay in and then go on to the end of the innings.
Yeah.
He's kind of should be like Raina and Raidu, right? But is actually, in terms of length of innings, much more like Maxwell and Shivam Dubey without the slogging. And that's the bit that we kind of couldn't unpack of what is happening here. And what Rob Barron, as I said, from Cricket 8 and Decimal Cricket, he played a big part in this piece because he said that it was every time Sudharsan had to up his scoring rate that he went out. And I think Rob was right and wrong. I think it's really what happens is when the second seamers come back on, and the second seamers start to, those middle guy seamers start to bowl around the 12th, 13th, 14th over. And he's trying to score quickly with the field out. So he's fine against seam in the power play. But when he gets to seam in that 13, 14 point and everyone's out on the boundary, he gets completely lost. And we know this because of the amount of times he's got stuck, so much so that he retired out in a game because he couldn't get the seamers away. So we can put this pattern together. And if you look, since I wrote that article, I think he's made a 60 and an 80 or a 70 and an 80, was it?
65 and then an 84, unbeaten.
Yeah.
So he batted till the end.
And if I'm not wrong, in both of those innings, he came in earlier.
And he got dropped.
Yeah, well, he got dropped is fine, but you're right. He should have been at, I think he got dropped at one stage at like 43 or something. Exactly where I said he would have got out, and sadly he went on. But the point being is, if he comes in a little bit earlier, and you might make the argument he could be an opener. The problem is, I don't think him and Gill are a particularly good partnership, which is probably why they haven't put them together. But if he comes in earlier in the innings, he can handle the paces with the field up because he can punch balls through. He's a beautiful player when he's playing, especially through the offside. He can punch the ball through the offside. Yeah.
Extremely elegant.
And then he plays spin for a really long time. So he can get to 60, 70 by the time it is that 12, 13, 14 over mark. And so he punches through that glass ceiling that he's created for himself. But if he comes in around the 5th, 6th, 7th over, by the time the seamers come back on and he has to go up in the rate, he cannot do that. And it's hilarious, this pattern. And as I said before, it doesn't fit anyone I've ever seen before. I've never seen this kind of player ever in any league. And that's why this is so interesting and fascinating, because we are either seeing a player who is just early in his career being weird, or we are potentially seeing a new kind of player come through that doesn't make any sense to me.
No sense whatsoever. And I mean, you guys did the whole, graph plotting and everything with respect to standard deviation and mean. And when you divide those two, the average player has a figure of around 80, whereas Sai Sudharsan is like 56. So it tells you how different he is to the average IPL batter, at least. And, on most days, he will get you a score of, between 20 and 50. I'm giving him those 10 extra runs. You said 40, but that probably
I think it's 20 and 45, I think, because we did a little box plot. You can see it. It's mostly 20 or it's probably 18 and 45, if you're being really honest. But that's essentially where he goes.
Yeah, and he rarely ever, crosses that mark, even though in his last two innings he has 65 and 84 clearly. But
I'm claiming both of those, by the way. I hope everyone's aware. The minute he went past it, I was like, that's me.
But you mentioned in the piece and also just right now that he has this glass ceiling that he kind of went through in those knocks. He shattered them, really, or that glass ceiling. And, they were, at least the 84 not out was an un-Sai-like innings, you'd have to say. Yeah. And we've witnessed these two knocks off late that I want to just ask you, as like someone who can, project something for a player. Do you foresee evolution in Sai Sudharshan's game? Because he is only 22 years old. Yep. He's a really elegant batter. And do you reckon this could be the season where he kind of changes his mold?
Yeah, I think one of those games, they were chasing something massive, weren't they? So he had to up his intent up.
That's the first one, the 65.
Yeah, was that in the second innings?
Yes, but the next game he was setting a target, right?
Yeah. So I wonder if some of that was just the natural intent and that has freed him up a little bit. And also, he probably would have I don't think I would. I'm the only guy who's noticed this. He probably would have noticed himself. He was getting a bit stuck.
Yeah.
And so, to be able to get past that, sometimes you feel you free it up. So that is something that's going on. Also, this is a faster scoring tournament. He can't continue to knock the ball around at a strike rate of 120 anymore. They're going to lose every game. Right. So I think there's a few different developments there. But to get back to his age, I think is a really important thing. My guess is if he's struggling to hit the seamers away when the field is out, it's probably, at least in part, a strength thing. Right? He doesn't have the ability to muscle the ball over the ropes like other players. Yeah. So he's either going to have to get bigger and stronger, right? And get to that point where he can at least get a couple away, or he's going to have to improvise more. And I don't think those are two things that he's very natural with at the moment, but he's 22.
Yes.
Right. So I would definitely retain him. Right. But I would then be spending the entire year with him in the gym. And literally every time he goes in the nets, I'll be like, flip that over your head. Right. We're gonna put the bowling machine on at 90 miles an hour, short and wide outside of stump, and we want you to hit it back over the bowling machine's head. Right. Things like that is the way that I would prepare him. But he has an elite skill against spin, but he's got to score quicker off it. He can't keep scoring at the rate he's going. And he has another elite skill, which is the ability to get in, right? So those are, how many players don't have those kinds of elite skills when they're 22, right? Yeah. So you start with that, and it's a bit like Rian Parag, right? We knew that Rian Parag could hit spin and that he could hit sixes. He didn't make any runs. So he's a completely different kind of player. He didn't make any runs. But you look at those two skills and you're like, okay, if we can get him just to be more consistent or to grow his game or to naturally evolve as he gets older, you'll be able to do that. And it's a bit the same with Sai. You want to invest in that kind of player rather than someone else who doesn't have two elite skills, because, some players only have one. A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? That I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I am sitting on a new one right now. I am the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button. And it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric, ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings.
I mean, are you sure that you don't want to retain him and send him to an army camp instead?
If you imagine how many sixes he would hit if he played for Pakistan.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy is definitely like a case study like none other. Of course, we've discussed that. And you also mentioned how he actually was retired once upon in the IPL. He's one of 3 players to ever have been retired. He was batting at 43, incidentally.
I also think he retired himself out. I don't know if I went back and checked, but I think he did. I think he realized he just wasn't going to hit any boundaries at that point.
Yeah. And he's this kind of cricketer who you can't call an anchor because he doesn't bat deep. And you know, he's not a hitter because, you know, he can't strike at that level. And he's just like this rock in the middle who will give you a consistent amount of runs on average every single time. And it's crazy. Like, even his true striker in the IPL is in the negative, as you mentioned earlier. And, you know, recent knocks have shown us that he might have that added gear to his game. Of course, we cannot deny that. And his true average is good. It's not elite, though. But what sort of player does that make Sai Sudharsan? Like, he's this T20 batter who's doing something completely weird and different in a run-heavy era when people are chasing down 262 and nearly scoring 300.
I think in a team, if you had a team that was like, I'm trying to think of the perfect side for him, like Kolkata, right? So you've got Narayan and Salt, right? And Sudarshan is like a backup. I think he'd be a really good number 3 because he can face the new ball okay with seam. As I said, he can punch the ball through. He will make sure that you don't lose a wicket for a long time, and then he will play the spin really well while you can have people hit at the other end. His problem is the team he's on is really one-paced. And they made a move recently where they put Shah Rukh Khan up the order. Yes. And I really, really like that because I was like, you can't just keep having these guys who all strike at 125 and 135 in this league. You have to do something different. So what you have is a 22-year-old who I don't know what he's going to be like at 24 or 25, but I'm quite excited to see if he just becomes more of this or if he becomes a Raina Raidu type player, which is also possible, right? But because you have that, you need to know how you are building your batting lineup around him. And I think that's the issue at the moment. They have so many one-pace players in that Gujarat lineup. And I know they've dropped 1 or 2 of them over the period partly because they didn't make any runs. But when you have a player like him that is so unique, you have to match it with good parts. So any team, I'm trying to think, Delhi would be another really interesting one where, you know, you're just like, great. He is Fraser McGurk insurance. Right? And the other important thing with him is he can play spin beautifully. So it's not as if you're getting nothing from him. And then if he develops 1 or 2 of his secondary skills in anything great, well, then you've got a really good player on your hand. But you have to know he's weird and you have to be working on him to make him less weird because you want to, if you have a star player that you have to build your team around, it's like, fair. But he's not a star player, right? He's a really good, just above average replacement level player at the moment. You shouldn't be having to move all the players around to make him work.
Yeah. Plus, like, he is still 22. He's young. He's a developing cricketer. He will mature as a batter. Just like we've seen Rayan Parag as well mature after so many poor seasons. And Sai Sudharsan did have a big match score, right, in last year's IPL final. So
it was in the final too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another great one. And, you know, Shivam Dubey, Deepak Hooda, Rayan Parag. There's a lot of guys that have taken that we could tell could do things and have taken a long time to develop. And Deepak Hooda is no longer an automatic pick. So he's regressed back to where I kind of thought he might. And Shivam Dubey has gone to a different level than even I thought. And I was the one that about 3 or 4 years ago telling Rajasthan, just bat him at number 4, and telling him he's the best player in the league. And he's better now than even I thought he could be. And I was the idiot telling him to go up the order. So I think, you know, you look at it that way and we don't know how these players are going to develop. And you follow other sports the same as I do. I think in cricket, sometimes we forget that players just develop at different times and coaches don't, but I think cricket fans and media and everyone else do, and it's like you have to identify talent. As I said, has 2 elite skills, right? You give him a 3rd elite skill or 2 or 3 others where he's handy, suddenly you have a star level player.
Yeah. And I mean, the talent is undoubtedly there. How it's nurtured is really what it'll come down to. But yeah, you spoke of his 2 really good strengths. Let's talk about his game against spin because, whilst he is someone who is extremely hard to get out if you're a tweaker, the odds of you getting him out would diminish big time. Of course, if Sai is batting because he plays spin that well, but it's not like he's ultra quick against spinners either. If we break down his performance versus different types of spinners, he destroys right arm leg spin on a relative scale, right? And then he's extremely slow versus left arm finger spinners. And that doesn't make sense to me because both of those balls are turning the same way. Is it a matter of flight? Is it the flatter trajectory that gets to him? Like, it's a matchup. They're both matchups that favor him. So what's happening here? How is right arm leg spin something that he enjoys thoroughly, and slow left armers is where he just continues to block?
The really interesting thing is you take it a step further and go, his record against left arm finger spin is very similar to his record against off spin, which is spinning away from the bat. So if you told me that leg spin was out here and left arm finger spin was in the middle and then off spin was on the other side, I'd be okay. Maybe he likes the ball going up out of the hand, whereas off finger spinners don't. It doesn't go up as much. I say that as someone who prefers that. I love the minute I see a wrist spinner on, I'm like, well, they're just going down because the minute it goes up out of the hand, I'm fine. Finger spin, I don't feel as comfortable, and that's why I sweep against finger spin because I don't feel the game in the same way.
How very English of you, Jarrod.
Yeah, but I'm madly running down the wicket at wrist spinner, so it's okay. And then so you look at him and you're like, but you still should be better against left arm finger spin than off spin. So the pattern you're right, it just doesn't make any sense. And again, he's a spin specialist, but he's actually slower against both kinds of finger spin. It's not exactly what you want from your spin specialist.
Yeah, I mean, most left-handers would jump on the opportunity to face a slow left armer, as we've seen all across the world. And it's weird. It keeps getting weirder because his record versus right arm pace, which is the most common bowling type in all of cricket, is abysmal. Maybe I'm being too lenient calling it abysmal, but basically, even right arm off spinners in which the ball is turning away from him, he does better against them as opposed to playing right arm pace. And that is really unique for a southpaw, because they do struggle a lot traditionally versus right arm off spin. And right arm pace is something you have to face all the goddamn time. So if you suck versus that, what are you best used as? Is Sai like a finger spin rotator and right arm leg spin basher, and eventually the seamers will just come and get him? Like,
I think the really interesting thing is, and you're right, you face it more than anything. I think you face it 4 times more than any other form of bowling, right? Now, where he bats that's not going to be as high, but even so, he's going to face it more than anything else he ever faces. It's how slow he is against it.
Yeah.
Right. If he went, there are some guys who go out a lot to right arm seam, and the reason they go out a lot to right arm seam is because they're smacking it out the park. He can stay in against it, but he can't score against it at all. And it's like, what about all those net bowlers? What about all those throwdowns? What about all those bowling machines? They're all basically right arm seam.
Yeah,
it's really weird to have that record. So the more you break him down, the odder he gets. If he was terrible against left arm seam, I'd be like, okay, there are some guys who just never manage to work out left arm seam. He gets out to left arm seam a lot, but he actually scores quite quickly off it. Whereas right arm seam, he just cannot score off it. And it's very rare you find someone who cannot score off right arm seam. It's just people are just born facing it. It is just the predominant bowling form in the world. Even in subcontinent where there's so much more spin, you still face more right arm seam than you do any particular kind of spinner.
Yeah, every aspect of his T20 batting just keeps getting more bizarre than the previous one. And if we look at Sai Sudharshan's entry points, right? He comes out to bat at first or second drop, usually in the 5th or 6th over, and then carries on till around the 12th over. That's when he runs out of time and doesn't bat deep and gets out. But that actually makes sense because Sai loves to play spin and is so good versus that sort of, bowling type or certain kinds of spin, I suppose. It's good that he gets to play spin in bulk, which is what those middle overs ensure. But in the long run, if he doesn't attack spin more regularly, do you think he can remain a valuable asset in T20 cricket? Because as things stand, Jared, he is quite one-dimensional with single usage really as a T20 batter, which is not something you want.
He either needs to be able to bat deeper or bat faster. Those are the two options, really. We talked about before, the different reasons why he might be able to do either of those things, but he has to do one or the other. In a better team, and remember, Gujarat were a much better team last year, I think they could carry him a little bit. They can't carry him this year. And, they're at 4 and 6 as we record this. And the batting isn't really been their issue. The batting has been average or slightly below average, but their bowling has been the bigger issue because we thought that would be a strength. But you can't really carry a player like that in a weak team. In a really good team, you can be like, okay, well, we've got 7 overs covered here. And the opposition's best spinners are going to go up against our really good player of spin. And so, Rashid Khan and Sunil Narayan and Chakravarti and Chahal and all these guys, they're not going to rip through this dude. We know that. None of them have, right? That's actually a really good skill.
Yeah.
But if your batting lineup's not very good, then that's a really limited skill.
He could be a fantastic ODI middle overs batter, wouldn't he? Right? No one could get him out and he could continue to score at this pace and it would work.
A shy hope type player.
Yeah. You know what's crazier? You look at his first class record, right? There's only 29 innings in there. He's a very, very young batter. And, he averages 38 and a half or something like that. Yep. He has 3 centuries, but the single digit scores go up to 10. So versus the red ball, he actually struggles. So
did that not blow your mind?
It blows my mind because up until now, he was a supreme starter, a spin rotator, a terrible finisher, and someone who can't play right arm pace. And now you're telling me that he actually has 300s in red ball cricket and 10 single digit figures? Like, none of that stuff adds up.
That was the thing that I could not get my head around, that he could be such a good starter in the other 2 formats. And if I was his coach, I'd almost say to him, pretend you're in a T20. Right? Yeah. If you have to whack a couple early to make yourself feel comfortable, or punch the ball through the field or run hard, or whatever it is that he is working for him in the limited overs, I'm like, do that. That's your thing. Go and do this thing. I couldn't believe that. And that was like the last thing I looked up. And it was just a casual thing of, there probably won't be anything here in it. But so what did you say before? 68 innings in white ball cricket for 6 single figure scores and 29 innings for 10. And you're just like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, he is a completely different species in both of those formats. And I was utterly fascinated with him. And this is one of those videos I remember years ago, Zach Lowe. Zach Lowe does a very similar thing to what I do, but for NBA. I remember him being interviewed by someone, and he goes, you get about 4 or 5 articles a year where you could do a story on, some player who's like not in the top 30 best players, but is really interesting and is maybe between, the 30 and 50. And over the years, I've done heaps of them. And when I did this, I honestly thought everyone would be as fascinated as me. And the video didn't pop, right? Like, we've been getting pretty consistent numbers on the other channel and it didn't pop. And I was like, I think it's people just don't, no one clicked on it because it was Sai Sudharsan. And if they clicked on it, I think everyone I've got more feedback from this video, despite far few viewers than I have on so many other things. And that's because the minute you get in, you're just like, wait, what? Who? Yeah. How? And that's where you go with him. And then once you get to the first class record at the end, you are just like, that is none of this makes sense. And I want to put chlorine on my brain.
Well, perhaps the spinners come in later in the first class games, and that's why the right arm paces just get him out quick. Maybe that's a viable explanation for this. But yeah, I mean, when you gave me a heads up about a Sai Sudharsan video, I did not expect it to go in this direction. And as soon as I saw the video, I was like, okay, yeah, foot marks locked in. Definitely doing this, right? And I mean, I do enjoy his batting at times, but now I'm just going to look at him from this different lens. And it's funny how I've dubbed them as the Gujarat Turtles. He could be the brand ambassador of the Gujarat Turtles.
He's the most turtle of all their turtles.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll end this asking you for a prediction. We've got 4 more knocks from Sai Sudharsan at the minimum in this IPL. Are we going to see a single digit score?
No.
And are we going to see 1 or more 50 plus?
I think we will see at least one more 50-plus score. I don't think we'll see a single-figure score, although, Jesus, due.
Yeah.
I think his lowest score was a run-out, too. I think he made 12 on a run-out. Oh, do you want to hear a funny story about that?
Sure.
So I had started, because, I've started betting and trading on games, and I don't really do unders and overs on batters all that much, unless there's something really obvious, right? We didn't talk about Venki. Venki's hilarious. Venki basically either makes 50 or 0, right?
Yeah.
So if Venki's on 5, you're like, I might as well go on his overs. But the minute he comes out, you should back him for his unders. But because I've done it before with Marcus North. So I've done this I've seen these patterns with other kinds of cricketers. That Marcus North was a test cricketer, but Marcus North only ever made single figures or triple figures in test cricket, right? He has this incredibly, I think he has the lowest median a score that me and Cheyenne found, and it's like 12 or something ridiculous in test cricket. And so with Marcus North, I told everyone, I wrote blogs about it. I said, you bet on Marcus North's unders, and the minute he goes over that, you go and you go and you go until he goes out. You're always going to make a profit. And I've told Marcus North about this, right? And so with Sudharsan, it's exactly the same thing. The thing is, he's now flipped it. And so, but there was one game where I backed him on his overs, which was, I don't know, let's say the run line was 22.5, right? And that was the game where he got run out. But you're like this, Behram. I accidentally pressed the wrong button and I accidentally backed him for unders. And so I managed to get the one time he didn't make it past 20, I still cashed him, which was absolutely hilarious. But yeah, it's these sort of patterns in cricketers is really, really fascinating. And I'd be interested to know what he would make of this. I don't have access to him. I don't know if I have anyone who can put me in touch, but I would love to chat to him about what he thinks about all this when it's put in front of him, because he must know this is not a normal thing.
Yeah, it's as far from normal as you could possibly imagine. Also, got lucky with that bet. But you've given your prediction that no single-figure scores in the 4 remaining innings, and he'll also score a 50. I'm going to go a bit rogue over here. 2 50s, one single-digit score.
That would be if he does that, I'm sorry, I might have to disown him. If he goes that wild on both sides, I don't know if I can handle that anymore.
Also, everyone who's watching, let us know in the comment section below. Of course, I think one of his innings will be already over by the time this comes out, so you'll have more information. But let us know who you think is going to win this, and give us your guesses as well. And I'm sure if you lasted this long in this podcast, you'll be just as shocked as both of us are on the life or not even the life and times, literally the very short but weird and bizarre career of Sai Sudharsan in T20 cricket. Anyway, enjoyed the podcast, you guys? Then please give us a like and follow both or subscribe to both this YouTube channel and Jared's other channel on YouTube. And just a quick reminder to everybody that for all of our written content, videos and podcasts, you can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that website. That will be your one-stop shop for everything. That'll be all for this week on Footmarks. We'll be back with another episode next week. Till then, you guys have a good one. Goodbye.